Dito sa video lecture na ito, pag-uusapan natin ang bank overdraft, compensating balance, at stale checks. So, ano ang mga concept na dapat natin tatandahan when it comes to these three topics? The stale checks, the bank overdraft, at ang compensating balance. Ano-ano ang mga adjusting journal entries natin at the end of the year? So, ano ba ang stale checks? Ang stale checks is when a payee have not encashed the checks. Yung check na yon ay still outstanding. After 6 months, ay magiging stale checks na siya. And bank overdraft is a credit balance of an account. And then compensating balance is the minimum amount maintained in checking or demand deposits in connection with the borrowing agreement or arrangement with a bank. So ano ang mga concept na dapat nating tatandaan when it comes to these three topics? Alright, under stale checks, hindi pa nai-encash ng payee ang cheque sa bangko. So paano natin i-account itong stale check na ito? So dalawang concept dapat mong tatandaan on stale checks. If the amount is material or the amount is immaterial. So, if the amount of the stale check is immaterial, ang gagawin natin ay ibabalik natin ito sa cash in bank, i-adjust natin sa miscellaneous income. So, our entry, adjusting journal entry on the stale check is debit to cash and credit to miscellaneous income. Alright, so ito ang magiging entry natin kapag immaterial ang stale check na yan. So, we debit our cash in bank, ibabalik natin sa ating cash in bank and credit to miscellaneous income. Then, kapag ang stale check naman ay material in amount, like 1,000,000. So, ang magiging entry natin, if it's material, our entry or adjusting journal entry will be debit to cash and credit to accounts payable. Kung nanggaling ito sa accounts payable. So, let's say, nanggaling yan sa accounts payable. So, we debit our cash in bank. Ibabalik natin yan sa ating cash in bank. And then, we credit our accounts payable. Isi-set up pa rin natin ang ating liability. So, we credit our accounts payable. So, yan ang ating stale check. Ano naman ang bank overdraft? Ang bank overdraft is a credit balance of an account. So, ang cash in bank natin, normally, is a debit balance. Kapag nagkaroon ng credit balance ang account mo sa bangko, yan ang tinatawag na bank overdraft. The credit balance of an account. Alright, so that's the credit balance of an account. So, dito sa bank overdraft, ang concept na dapat mong tatandaan is the bank overdraft on the same bank or on a different bank. Ang concept ng bank overdraft is kung nasa same bank ba or different bank. On the same bank and the amount is material or immaterial ang amount. Whether this is a material amount or immaterial amount, pwede natin siyang i-offset. On the same bank, whether this is material or immaterial in amount, pwede natin siyang i-offset. Alright? Ang ibig sabihin, pwede natin i-offset sa ibang account on the same bank. Kapag different bank naman, ang overdraft, ang isang account mo sa isang bangko, if it's a different bank, aalamin mo din kung material ang amount or immaterial. So, if it's a different bank and the amount is material, ang gagawin natin is we cannot offset the amount. Kapag different banks but immaterial in amount, pwede na natin siyang i-offset. Alright, so yan ang bank overdraft. The bank overdraft is the credit balance of an account. And there's two concepts dapat mong tatandaan if it's the same bank or a different banks. Kapag the same bank, whether this is material or immaterial, it can be offset. So, pwede mo siyang i-offset sa ibang account. Kapag different bank naman, kapag material ang amount, hindi natin pwedeng i-offset. So, ano ang gagawin natin kung hindi natin ito ma-i-offset? So, we will classify this as a current liability. Bank overdraft is from a different bank at material ang amount, hindi natin siya pwedeng i-offset. I-classify natin yan as a current liability. Alright? Kapag immaterial naman, pwede mo siyang i-offset. So, sa compensating balance naman, ano ba ang compensating balance? A compensating balance is the minimum amount maintained in a checking or demand deposit in connections with a borrowing arrangement with a bank. So, ang ibig sabihin, si company, umutang siya sa bangko. Kapag umutang si company sa bangko, itong si bangko, nagre-require siya ng minimum balance on that account. Yan ang tinatawag na compensating balance. Dito sa compensating balance, dalawang concept ang dapat natin pag-aralan or alamin. Is the compensating balance from a short-term borrowing or from a long-term borrowing? Dalawang klase itong compensating balance. The compensating balance from a short term or from the long term. Yung short term, within a year lang. Itong long term naman is beyond 1 year. So kapag ang compensating balance is from a short term borrowing, kailangan mo malaman kung ang short term borrowing na ito ay not legally restricted or legally restricted. So, dito sa short-term borrowing, dalawang dapat mong tandaan. If the short-term borrowing is not legally restricted, then we will classify this as cash under current asset. So, kapag ang compensating balance is not legally restricted, we will classify this as cash under current asset. Kapag legally restricted naman siya, we will classify this as cash held as compensating balance under current asset too. So, under current asset pa rin siya kasi short-term borrowings. But if it's legally restricted, we cannot classify this as cash. Hindi mo pwedeng isama sa cash account. So, magkakaroon siya ng another account which is the cash held as compensating balance, which is still under current asset because it's a short-term borrowing. Alright? Kapag long-term borrowing naman siya, ang ibig sabihin, pamatagalan. So, beyond 1 year. Kapag long-term ang compensating balance, then we will classify this as non-current asset. So, kapag long-term ang compensating balance, we will classify this as a non-current assets under long-term investment. Alright? So, ganito ang ating stale checks, bank overdraft, at compensating balance. Ang stale checks, usually, ang stale checks, depende yan sa policy ng company. Pwedeng magiging stale checks na siya after 3 months, but the timeline here, generally 6 months, is considered as a stale checks. So, ang gagawin ng company kapag meron kang stale checks, immaterial ba ang amount, ibabalik natin sa cash in bank at magre-recognize na tayo ng miscellaneous income. Kapag material naman ang amount, ibabalik natin yan sa cash in bank at ibabalik din natin yan as an obligations of the company as an accounts payable, for example. Sa bank overdraft naman, ito ay credit balance ng isang account sa bangko. Alright? Kapag same bank siya, whether it's material or immaterial, you can offset the amount to the other account. Pag different banks naman, kapag material ang amount, hindi mo siya pwedeng i-offset. Ika-classify mo ito as a current liability. Kapag immaterial naman ang amount, pwede mo siyang i-offset. Let's say 10 pesos or 100 pesos. out of a multi-million company, pwede mo na siyang i-offset, right? On the compensating balance, ito yung nakikreate ang compensating balance kapag nagborrow ang company ng money from the bank, and the bank will require the company to maintain a minimum amount in a checking account or a demand deposit. So, kapag ang compensating balance na yan ay nanggaling sa short-term borrowing and the compensating balance is not legally restricted, ang ibig sabihin, not legally restricted, pwede mo siyang i-withdraw. Pwede mo siyang gamitin. If it's not legally restricted, then we will classify this as cash. Kasama siya sa cash na account. Of course, under current asset. If it's legally restricted, magkakaroon siya a different account, cash held as compensating balance under current asset. Bakit under current asset? Kasi short-term pa rin siya. So kapag ang compensating balance is from a long-term borrowings, we will classify this as a non-current assets under long-term investment. So ito po ang ating still checks, bank overdraft, and compensating balance under cash and cash equivalent. Then pag-usapan naman natin ang petty cash fund.